Good morning, Colin. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you, Mark?
Excellent. Thanks very much for coming aboard. And sorry for the technical error. We'll have to post this interview when we're actually done. I'll throw it up on BrandDIY. But I am so stoked to have you aboard because you are a battle-scarred entrepreneur and your heart's in the right place. You want to help entrepreneurs and brands, founders rather, get a hold of their business and make a success of it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thanks for sharing your wisdom, man.
Oh, anytime. No, I'm. It's funny. I often say, you, as an entrepreneur, I've got the scuffed knees, the broken nose, and the empty wallets to show for it, right?
You have one heck of a story. Before we go into the story, Colin, you and I, we got to know each other because we're both part of the Holt Accelerator fintech accelerator out of Montreal. And you and I met because we were both working on a sort of like a presentation day where startups were presenting their work. And then I found out that you're into Tool, prog rock, heavy metal band, and I played in bands. And yeah, there. I mean, once you've played in a band, you're pretty much done. You're pretty good.
Yeah, I love it. I've done the same. Yep.
You got to relate, and you play hockey, so we
Yeah,
got a relationship for
absolutely.
life, as far as I'm
You got
concerned.
the whole spectrum there.
Exactly, and you're from Alberta, even though it's Edmonton.
I agree, but actually, that's why I say I'm from St. Albert.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. St. Albert, because that's classy. So I want to hear the story. Yesterday on the BrandDIY group, I posted your story, your blog post.
Sure.
Take me through that. It's horrendous and gripping and chilling and very inspiring.
Sure. I don't know if we have enough time to go through all of it, but the long story short is I ended up being very successful in raising capital and getting into a franchise opportunity. And so I bought the rights for several properties across the prairies. And we started developing the first one, had a lot of success in raising capital. 2008 hit, and a lot of things started unwinding, a lot of things started unraveling. We ended up going into massive amounts of debt. I mean, I made some very serious mistakes in how that went. So some lessons learned there. We can talk about that. But the long and short of it, we had everything wash away. And while this was going on, I ended up with flesh-eating disease. And so ended up in the hospital for 3 months and in and out of hospitals. And so all of these things kind of happened in this perfect storm that entrepreneurs get to go through every now and again. And so we lost everything. We lost $4.5 million. We lost our property, our house, kind of everything. My health for a while, almost the marriage, a little bit of everything at the time. And we had to rebuild. So for the next 4 years, going through that trough of despair and just trying to figure out, am I even good enough? Can I even do anything? What am I good at? And trying to understand what that looks like, trying to run a family and take odd jobs and try to prove to the world that I'm still a good entrepreneur, and to prove to myself that I'm still a good entrepreneur, and then try to rebuild that and get back into the game again and do something good and create income for my family and create a lifestyle that I love and start helping others. And so a lot of that spun into I'd been working with entrepreneurs for years through this, but finally got to the place where it's like, I really love working with entrepreneurs. And so from that developed the entrepreneur roadmap, of course, and a lot more of the tools that we have in place now. And then, of course, get to mentor and judge and spend a lot of time working with entrepreneurs through pitch days and all that as well.
Yeah. Now, I mean, when I saw $4.5 million, when I first started my own agency, Change, all about making sustainability sexy, I lost a sum of money, but that was a rounding error compared to what you lost. The BrandDIY is a group of people, entrepreneurs, founders, just coming out of the gate. As gruesome as it is, telling stories like that is very reassuring, because I think everybody feels like they're the unique screw up. And I think it makes for one hell of a brand story. And in my experience, most of the people who have done stuff like this do bounce back, and
Yes.
it becomes just one heck of a hero's journey.
Well,
In your experience, the same thing?
yeah. Well, I mean, you bring up a tremendous point. Well, a couple of things in there. First of all, I don't think entrepreneurs talk about this as much as they should, right? There's what I found is we all know that there's probably about a 90-95% chance of failure in business.
Mhm.
Now, that's very encompassing and it's hard to measure and all that kind of stuff. But the scariest number to me is, well, two things from that. One is that probably 77% of them never try again.
Really?
Yeah. So you've got these guys. I mean, yeah, you're gonna probably have a failure, even if it was just a bad idea. And that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything against you. Separating yourself from the business is one of the first keys that you got to remember, right? Your business is just a vehicle. You know, it's like a car. And if it doesn't run very well, or if it breaks down on the side of the road, you got to go get another one, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that because your car broke down, you suck as a driver. Maybe it depends on how you upkept that vehicle, but you know my point, right? You are your own entity and your vehicle is another entity, and so your business is an entity and you're an entity, and just because those two things are combined for a while doesn't mean that it reflects one another necessarily, right? So but the problem is when we fail in our business and we reflect it on ourselves, we're like, whoa, I don't want to go through that again. And that's the opportunity. You miss the opportunity of how much you learned. I mean, I lost a lot and I learned a lot, right? And I'd never want to go through that again. And guess what? I deeply avoid a lot of the mistakes I made in that time, right? And if you look, some of the biggest investors in the world, a lot of the VCs, a lot of the angels, a lot of the guys out there, they won't even talk to entrepreneurs unless they've gone through a massive failure. And the reason for that is because you learn so much more. There was one of the guys at IBM way back in the day. They, one of the guys
I know this story.
Yeah, 4.5 or something, 4.5 million or $6.5 million. And of course the news got a hold of this and said, how come you're not firing that guy? And he said, he didn't lose $6 million. He learned a $6 million lesson.
Yeah.
We just invested a $6 million education in that guy, right? And so that's the term is we need to embrace the failure and say, okay, I'm not going to do that again, and then figure out how to do it better. And so the guys that actually do it twice, 3, 4, 5 times in a row are the ones that you can bank on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the disappointing part. But part of that is being willing to try, and the other part of the lesson is fail in a small amount in the shortest amount of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what can you do that will prove or disprove your idea in a short amount of time with the least amount of money, right?
Yeah. So do you think that what happened to you is a direct cause of a direct influence then on starting Fuse 42? Fuse 42, for the folks who didn't read the preamble, is Incubator Accelerator, run out of Edmonton, and you're helping. You're not fintech.
No. I mean, we can have fintech. Our focus is completely on companies working in the sustainable development goals. So those 17 sustainable development goals under the UN. If you're kind of working to try to solve that poverty or equality or issues with the oceans, or there's 17 of them. I'm not going to list them all. I don't think I could. No. But if you're focused on solving some of those problems, that's what we do. We will work with you as an entrepreneur and help you to build out your model in a bunch of different areas.
Okay. Do you think that was, the failure of your own company, direct influence on trying to help all these entrepreneurs out?
Yes. And one of the, again, going back to it, is one of the great things about going through that failure is being able to help others once you learn about them, right? Somebody once said, I forget who it was, but they said entrepreneurship is a little bit like walking down a road and falling into a hole, right? And you walk in and you can't find anything. You're scared. You're starving. You're hungry. It's dark. You can't see anything. And so you fumble around in the dark for a while, find a little morsel of food and eat something, and then find a ladder and a light, and you slowly get out of the hole, only to walk 5 more feet and fall into another hole, right? Eventually, you get better at finding what's in the hole and getting out of those holes, right? And that's kind of entrepreneurship. And so you can imagine if I've fallen into a number of holes, then all I want to do is help somebody else avoid some of those holes, right? And you can't avoid all of them, but you can avoid a bunch of the needless ones. And so what we say in my accelerator and in my entrepreneur roadmap model is, we want to avoid needless failure. Some of those big things that you don't have to step in if you can avoid it. So walking through a minefield, how do you avoid those mines, right?
Well, I find also when I started, I was in a pretty dark place too for a while with my business sort of dwindling. I got into sustainability too early, as opposed to too late. I think there's only too early or too late with sustainability. I'm not sure, but I got into it too early and it was a dark place. But had I known or had I talked to entrepreneurs, I think one of the big things is talking to others and they go, oh yeah. It was only later when I got involved with accelerators out here in Victoria that I was surrounded by people I admired and looked up to who said, oh yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
And you're like, you got to be kidding,
Yeah.
So just the reassurance that, it might feel
Yeah.
like a terrible thing now, but it's going to be one hell of a story later.
That's right.
And
It's the peer-to-peer stuff. We need it so much. We have to be willing to talk about it. We walk around as entrepreneurs going, how's it going? Oh, it's going awesome. Right. And that's such a load of crap most of the time. Right. You're always wrestling with something, and we need to be able to stop a little bit and talk with one another and share some of those stories. Right. And not be afraid to look like a bit of an idiot or look like a failure, because that's not the point. How do you learn to walk? By falling down a lot. Right. And so you've got to be able to get up, and you've got to be able to brush yourself off and ask for help and figure out ways around it. And the only way to do that is through conversations like this.
Talk to me about the entrepreneur's roadmap. And I mean, the goal in this conversation is to, let the folks out there know who are starting their own business and they're entrepreneurs. The entrepreneur's roadmap is a wonderful tool because it comes from the right place. It comes from a person who's lived it, because a lot of these things are academic or book read, and yours comes from a place of you've been there. And brand learnings that people could take right away, So talk to me about the entrepreneur's roadmap. How'd you come up with it?
Yeah. So the entrepreneur roadmap specifically is the way I look at it, how it fits in. Okay. So we have our accelerator Fees 42, right? And in that we have some programming, what we do to help teach entrepreneurs. And that a lot of that programming comes from the entrepreneur roadmap. But the entrepreneur roadmap is before it, in the sense that, if for all those entrepreneurs that are just learning and are trying to get into, say, an accelerator, or into even working with you for your BrandDIY, anything that you can learn from, you need to figure out some of the beginning pieces. I can't probably afford, or you can't afford me to work with me necessarily one-on-one, because I'm kind of expensive that way, as you might be. But if I can give them a do-it-yourself kind of thing that they can work on their own, which is the entrepreneur roadmap, they're going to learn a lot of the basics, a lot of the fundamentals, a lot of that entrepreneur DNA. These are the things to avoid, and these are the things you need to ask yourself to make sure that you have a stable, solid, grounded business that's what I call tractionable and investable. Right. And when I say investable, not necessarily raising millions, but even for me to invest my time into it, like as an entrepreneur. Should I spend my time on this? No. Right. You asked the question, you said you got into sustainability too early. Well, if you had gone through the entrepreneur roadmap, maybe you would have seen some of those markers.
I wouldn't have. I honestly, I came into it. I was a high-priced executive at a big ad agency.
Yeah.
And honestly, my wife jokes about this kind of grimly, that when I started my business, I didn't know how to bill.
Right.
I didn't know what my time was worth. I was used to doing a commercial. People give me $1 million. I go, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I didn't know what a liter of gas cost, what car insurance cost. I didn't know nothing. Everything was taken care of. And suddenly I'm on my own and I go, I don't know, $20 for a commercial. I don't know.
That's right.
And also with sustainability, I hadn't figured out that at the time when I started, big companies like Unilever and Budweiser, Procter and Gamble, they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole on their brand. They were all doing it internally for to bolster up the stakeholders and make the folks inside feel like they're working for a good company.
Right.
But if they put it on a bottle of shampoo, that would be shorthand for this shampoo leaves your hair greasy and smelling like a hippie. Right. And it costs too much. And so they wouldn't go near it. And so all my clients were people who were even poorer than myself, working out of a garage, making organic ice cream. Right. You can't make a living. And I didn't think to ask or find out. I didn't have any construct to find out. I just said, of course it'll work.
Yeah, well, and that's actually, you bring up a beautiful point. Most of the people starting business, and again, so in Alberta, I don't know what it is in BC, we could do the numbers, but it's about 19.6% of the population are entrepreneurs. That turns out to be about 850,000 entrepreneurs in Alberta. Now, some of them are just guys building organic ice cream, or a small little brewery, or a consulting company, or driving a water truck, whatever it might be. They're not looking to build the next Facebook, right? They're just looking to make a living and have a little bit of money coming in. but nobody helps them, right? And here's the problem: you're a technician. I mean, E-Myth talks about this a lot. So the book E-Myth is really good for that. But it's this idea of a baker who goes out and they say, I'm going to make my own muffins and sell them. Okay, that's great. You've got the technical aspects of your business down, right? Go and make muffins and sell them. But the problem is there's so many other things. How do you price it? Who do you talk to? How do you do your books? How do you market this? How do you tell the world? There's so many things. What does it mean to hire somebody? When do you hire? How do you hire? There's so many booby traps out there that it takes us all out. And you found that out, right? It's not the business model might be sound, but to actually operate that business as an entrepreneur, it's so many skills that most of us don't have. It's not intuitive. And so that's why I say avoiding needless failure, right?
Yeah.
If I can help you get some of those basics down through the entrepreneur roadmap, then you will know a little bit more about what to do and avoid some of those potholes and get to the point where you have a sustainable, cash flow business, right?
Yeah. Let's focus in for a second on brands, because I mean, this show is all about brands. You work with a lot of startups, a lot of people out of the garage. And you also have a background as a graphic designer and running your own graphics business. So you know communication. What are the most common pitfalls in your opinion, as far as just putting the brand out there?
Well, actually, that's a great question. I think a couple of things that pop into mind is, one, they don't really understand the problem that they're solving. Okay, so I'm trying to think here.
I know exactly what this is. This goes back to a story I had when I went on my own as a consultant. I went to my former boss at the big agency, and because my impression is I was building future-proof brands and I was innovative and I was creative and I was smart and I had a black turtleneck and I had all that stuff, and that's why people hired me. And he said, "Nah, they hire you because you're simple." And I said, "What? I'm Forrest Gump." And he said, no, you take complicated things and you make them simple. And that's really hard.
Yeah.
And I hated it. So not only didn't I know what problem I was solving, but when I was told the problem I'm solving, I didn't even want to acknowledge that because I hated it so much.
So one of the brands that I have, we're reinventing drywall. Okay. I mean, talk about boring, right? Like, the most ubiquitous building supply out there, but we're trying to reinvent it. We're making it lighter, fireproof, mold proof, some of those things already exist in it, but I'm trying to do it all in a very lightweight board. Now, if I go and tell people I'm building lightweight drywall, everybody kind of goes, okay, yeah, I get it, right? But that's not the problem. The problem isn't just lightweight board, it's what causes the lightweight board to be a problem or heavy board to be a problem. And when I went and talked to installers, one of the biggest problems is they have WCB claims constantly because these heavy boards, especially the fireproof stuff, they pick it up and these big guys, they still put their back out. So they can't work. They're now on WCB. The company's paying them and they can't even, they have to hire more employees. And the only employees that they can hire are these big burly guys that carry drywall. And so that's the problem, right? So sometimes the problem looks like it's this, but it's under here somewhere. You've got to be able to talk with the clients enough to ask those questions. So branding, the biggest thing that I find is, one, you really got to talk to your customers to understand why the problem. They keep asking why. Why is it a problem for you? Why is that a problem for you? Why is that a problem for you? And all of a sudden you start to get this real picture and you go, oh my goodness, my solution isn't for that, it's for this over here. And you have to kind of dial it in and really fix it. And some of that journey, it's just organic. You can't force it to happen faster. So that's the first thing. The other thing is even explaining it. Most people explain it at this industry jargon level instead of simplifying it and making it something that a 10-year-old can understand. And there's nothing wrong with, I'm not saying 10-year-olds are dumb. That's not the point. But we try to explain things in these cool sounding terms that make us look good. When it doesn't matter, because you got like 5 seconds of my attention, you better be able to explain what you're doing in a way that I can understand and go, okay, I get it. And if I can't, then I don't want to hear it. I'm just going to lose interest. I'm going to glaze over and I'm not going to pay attention. But if you tell a story in a very, like I call it a 3-sentence pitch is one of the things I use, right? You know how, we solve that by, imagine if, right? And you talk about this, the middle one a lot, we do what, for who, how, right? That's the second pitch. So you know how this is a problem. We solve that by doing this for who, for how. And, imagine, yeah, and that's the vision statement of what
Oh,
it
I
could
love
be.
that. I'm going to steal that. That's really good. I like
By all
that.
means, it's not mine. I think it's, I think it's in Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. I can't remember if that's what he uses, but I've kind of modified it over years too. But yeah.
But it is that simple, right? And that, do you find that a lot of folks come into the incubator and they're just solving a problem that they're just enamored with, and they have put no sort of time into asking folks what they actually want?
Again, I have so many quotes that I can't always attribute them properly, but don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you fall in love with the problem, and that's the thing, when you really get excited about the problem, like, so for example, we also have a micro lending platform, right? For entrepreneurs in developing countries. Because if you look at it, what's the problem there? I've lived through it. We were trying to live a family of 5, 3 kids, and my wife and I, under $20,000 a year, right? Like, for that time going through that period after the business problems, it's practically impossible. Like, and so I know what it's like to be impoverished, and I'm just trying to do anything and everything I can to just make a few bucks, right? And so if we can teach something to those people, the problem is poverty for the entrepreneur. And so, well, microloans, like just a small little loan, $700, $1,000 to get you better at doing what you already want to do. Right. So we created that solution to the problem. I'm not excited about the solution. The solution could be anything. It could be working with them. It could be sending a consultant in to fix it for them. There's 1,000 different solutions. But the problem is, when that entrepreneur doesn't have food on the table for his family, how do we solve that? Right? A number of ways, but the problem is the exciting one, because I've lived it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, one thing that is so compelling about, when you sent me that story, it is the story. And I find that a lot of entrepreneurs shortchange that as well, because I find that if I align with you as a human, you're Steve Jobs, you're creative. I want to be like Steve Jobs. I want to be creative. I go, I'll buy a frying pan from you. I don't care.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people shortchange that too. As entrepreneurs, I saw that in the Holt pitch, all the Holt pitches that they go right into, here's what we do, here's how we do it. I think a lot of them, if they would have just told us their life story, I would have been listening for a lot longer and a lot harder.
Yes.
Do you find that with the folks in the incubator as well, that they shortchange their personal experience and their personality?
Yes, right. We saw that in the pitches too. The guys that would connect it to the original story, especially that one guy, if you remember, he was talking about the story and it was all great and all, but then he said, well, then we had this workshop and this is what came out of it. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's what you need to use to sell it, right? It was a workshop where everybody got together and they told the story for them. And then now they have the solution. That was way better sell. So telling the story of where it came from. So that goes back to the idea of that 3-sentence pitch. How, right?
You know how this always happens.
How I have to connect with you. If I don't connect with you and say, how this is a problem. If you don't think it's a problem, you're going to go, yeah, whatever, right? You know how Tool is the greatest band that ever lived, right? No, I don't agree with you, right? Right, but if we go deeper and say, how, I love a good music and what it can do to just, take stress off you and things like that, and people go, right? Once they're, nodding with you, now you've got them and say, okay, well, we solved that by, right? Yeah. So you're connecting, like you said, your story has to be something that's a little more personal, or a story about who you're solving the problem for.
The customer story, yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's funny because just yesterday was announced Tara Bosch at Smart Suites just sold the company for $400 million. I don't know if you're familiar with the story. No. I worked on her investment pitch. Okay. And then she went on Dragon's Den. She killed it. Arlene Dickinson took her on. And 7 or 6 years later, she's gone from cooking sugar-free gummy bears on her family's stove to a $400 million sale. That's and awesome. What was wild about her was we were trying to get a beat on the company when she was going for the investment, because I was working with her coach. I'm like, what the hell is it about this company? And it wasn't gummy bears. It wasn't sugar-free. it was the story about her and her grandma who loved candies, but she had body issues. Her grandma, I think, was diabetic. I'm not sure, but it was a sort of a fuzzy sort of, we had issues with sugar.
Yeah.
And so we couldn't enjoy these things. And so she made it her mission to take sugar out of the equation.
Yeah.
And then that led to, well, she makes gummy bears. Why doesn't Nestle make gummy bears? Or why doesn't, all these other companies that could, Mars, why doesn't FM Mars make gummy bears? They could do it just like her. And then we found out what it is with her is that she connects with her tribe on Instagram.
Yeah.
And she goes, hey guys, I got all these gummy bears at ABC drugstore, and boom, like a flock of locusts, they go in there and clean it out. So she gets this reputation that when she tells people to go buy stuff, they buy it, and they have this weird sort of Instagram tribe, which she would have done anyway.
Yeah.
And it's just sharing her story,
And that's it. I mean, you've got to connect with the problem and make it a real issue. Like, I love that. I mean, it's great to hear the story, because as soon as you hear it, I mean, we're instantly storytellers anyway, but we don't do it enough. We don't actually talk about the story and where it came from. A little quick story. That's what I love about the how, or and just that statement alone engages us in a little bit of a story.
I love it.
Right? So love it.
All right, amigo, I've taken enough of your time here. But folks can reach out to you on BrandDIY in the BrandDIY group. You're one of the members. All they have to type in is Colin Christensen, and your name will pop up, but they can ask you questions. Plus, I'll link you in this interview. And hopefully we'll be working together on helping entrepreneurs in the near future. Anything we can do to do that is a good thing. So, it is a good thing, isn't it? It's a nice way to spend your day. It's better than making firearms, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe I'm reaching. I don't know. Maybe we should try that. All right, Colin. Have a great one. Enjoy your day. Take care. Bye.